Hey everybody! So I have the second weave glued up for my chainmail, and I want to take this time to show you how I maintain the accuracy and consistency in my staves as I approach the joiner and get ready for milling the pieces down for inserting the next and final weave. So now that we have our second weave glued up, I'm ready to mill one of these edges to reestablish my square, my reference edge. Before we move over to the joiner, I want to talk about some aspects of prepping this piece before we actually get over there, so that way we get clean and consistent milling on the joiner. Now you can see here that we have a lot of dried glue squeeze out. It's really important that we take our time cleaning and prepping this surface before we move over to the joiner, because these dried glue spots can essentially act as like a high spot or like a shim that will give you a tapering or inconsistent milling on the joiner. So the most important dimension that we need to maintain when approaching the joiner and milling these pieces, prepping them for final dimensioning through the planer, is the thickness between this accent strip and the bottom surface here. You really want to make sure that we maintain a nice consistency along the entire length of the stave. So let's say, for instance, that if we have, if we didn't spend a lot of time cleaning up all the glue and we had like one piece of glue creating a high spot, what'll happen is that high spot will be lifting the piece up, and then so as we run it on the joiner, we're going to be jointing the back end more than we're going to be jointing the front, essentially creating a large taper down the entire length of our stave. So this is why it's really important that at this stage we take our time and really clean up this dry glue squeeze out very nicely and prep the piece before we move over to the joiner. Alright, so for cleaning up this dry glue squeeze out, you could use a sharp chisel or any other types of cleanup tools that you have. I really like to use a hand plane because I'm going to really smooth out also any of like the accent strips or knock down any high points in the wood itself. So I like to use my hand plane to prep the piece before we move over to the joiner. So a reason why I really prefer to use the hand plane at this point is in between the accent strip and the weave, you could feel that some of the accent strips are much higher than, say, like the weave, and it's actually protruding above the background species. So using the hand plane is not only going to knock down all the glue, I'm also going to even out and level all of these different strips to make sure I have one cohesive plane, so that way when I move over to the joiner, I'm getting a consistent mill along the entire surface. So now that I got it feeling really nice and flat and smooth, I think I'm going to call it good. Looks like I have a little high spot right here. Just kind of go through and make sure I knock it down. So I really am not trying to establish a square or dimension at this point with my hand plane. I'm really just trying to get everything smooth and flat. You really don't want to do any dimensioning here, because if you trying to establish a square with your hand plane, you might establish a taper, and then when you get over to the joiner, you're going to take off too much material and it could just throw off your entire pattern. So it's really important that you don't go too far. Just clean it up and just get it feeling nice and smooth. Alright, so now that I have my piece nice and smooth and prepped, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to plane down all of my other pieces, and then we'll move over to the joiner. Now that we have all the pieces prepped, before we move over to the joiner, I'm just going to take my combination square and I'm just going to check where this bottom accent strip is and just see what my consistency is looking like all the way down my stave. And right now it's looking really nice and consistent. So what we're going to do, we're going to do 2 light passes on the joiner, and then we're going to come back, check our square, and also check this dimension to see if we've tapered it all along the length of the stave. So now I'm just going to take my little machinist square. I'm just going to go through and just check that my square is looking good, looking beautiful. Good. Alright, so my square looks really good. Now that we see that we've established our square, I'm just going to go through and just check the piece just to see if I have any tapering at all. So I'm going to recalibrate it back down to where my accent strip is right on the 1-inch line. I'm just going to kind of just walk it down and just see how it looks. It's looking really good. Nice. So I ran 2 passes. I got a really nice consistent line, and I reestablished my square. So now I'm going to go through, I'm going to do 2 passes on all of my pieces, and I'm just going to check them as I go along to make sure that I maintain a nice consistency through all the staves. So now that I have all of my pieces off of the joiner, I went through and I checked all the consistency throughout the length of the stave, and I'm really happy with the results that I got. This is a really important aspect to be monitoring and maintaining throughout the build. It's really easy to have one stave have say for instance a piece of wood chip on the joiner, and then next thing you know you're milling a big huge taper down your whole stave and you've completely offset the entire pattern. So just really take the time to make sure that your tool's clean, that the piece is properly prepped, and that you're getting accurate and consistent passes through all of your tools.